Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Uncensored CMO. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about who gives a crap. Not the general attitude to life, but actually a brand that is disrupting the market for toilet roll. I know I never thought I'd be talking about toilet roll in quite this level of passion on the podcast. But I'm joined by Emily Kraftman. She is the Managing Director for Who Gives a Crap for UK and Europe. And I want to catch up with her to find out what the brand are doing. Why does purpose matter? Why does purpose in toilet roll matter, of all things? But what are they doing to completely disrupt the industry? How they establish a brand, DTC, and why they're now going into retail. Now, prior to joining Who Gives a Crap, Emily was also marketing director at Deliveroo. In fact, she was marketing director before most people had even heard of it. Of course, we all know what it is now, but actually she was on the journey very early on as that business went through a massive transformation. So I also wanted to find out from her what was the secret to their success, particularly from a marketing point of view. There's loads in this episode. I know you're going to love it. Here's my conversation with Emily Kraftman. Welcome back, everybody, to Uncensored CMO. And here I am, joined by the managing director of Who Gives a Crap.
Hello.
Now, you must find, how are you introduced, like that? Or what's
yes, it does get me into trouble sometimes. So I go to the US for work a bit. And last year, when I was at border control, and they're asking me why I'm there, and then they said, where do you work? And I paused because I realized if I replied, who gives a crap, I was probably going to get arrested. So then had to start with, I work for a toilet paper company, and it has a funny name, but I promise it's real. And then when I told my team, they're like, yeah, that's just a rite of passage that everyone has to go through.
That's like the induction program. You have to have your awkward moment with security. Go, come on, let's be honest. Who gives a crap? That must be... Actually, you've given me a flashback. So I once got detained by US Border Force, and it was really innocent. I was making an advert for a kids drink, and we were filming it in Colombia because apparently there's an amazing kind of film industry in Colombia. So we could film 2 ads for about a third of the price of London. And anyway, it was a Dutch agency I was working with. So they were flying, from Schiphol, and I was flying from London. And they said, John, would you mind? It was a kids. We were filming these 2 kids with spacesuits, right? And they were like on Mars or whatever. And they said, John, could you bring the 2 spacesuits out that were kind of tailor made in London, right? In your kit with you. And can you bring? I think it was $10,000 of cash because we were going to pay all the locals in. I know. Well, if it was a direct flight, it'd be fine. But I was flying via Atlanta to Bogota. And I didn't even think about it, right? And I'm in the US security queue, right? I've got 4 hours, to get between my plane and the one that was leaving. And do you know what? It genuinely didn't cross my mind until I was sat there looking at and they look really serious, don't they? You got the screens and the
you feel almost guilty when you're like, I did something.
So where are you going? I'm going Colombia. And so immediately I'm thinking, oh, okay, all right, doesn't sound good. Okay, and what are you carrying on your person? Oh, 2 spacesuits and a bit of cash. And they're literally going, do you think I was born yesterday type thing. It was like 3.5 hours. Oh, wow. I got detained. I sat in a room with 4 of them grilling me. Eventually they go, this is so bizarre.
It can't
that
be
actually
criminal.
you cannot be like doing anything. So anyway, there's my border force story.
Awesome.
Let's take you back to why marketing in the first place. How did you get into this wonderful world?
Yeah, well, I think the truth is somewhere between a very flippant answer and the answer I'd give in like my grad scheme interview. So the flippant answer is I had no idea what I wanted to do. I'd always picked subjects that I enjoyed studying. So I did history and politics at uni, and I'd spent all my uni summers being a camp counsellor, which I loved but wasn't a long-term career. And so I kind of ended up going down the grad scheme route by process of elimination of can't do that, don't want to do this, don't want to do that. Oh, marketing, that sounds interesting. The actual interview answer was more when I thought about it, history and politics is all around like how people think and why they think in the way that they do and why they behave in the way that they do, which marketing is fundamentally. And also I grew up in a really entrepreneurial kind of environment. My dad ran his own business. My grandpa ran his own business. And so I was always interested in kind of the business side of things. So it was kind of the process of elimination type side with knowing I wanted to work in business and then trying to figure out functionally what that would be. But I had no marketing like education or anything like that. So I, in some ways, fell into it after realizing that camp counselor was not a career choice.
I think we're a little bit similar because I did finance and economics. And then I was trying to work out what function in a business makes the decisions and basically shapes the future. Because I started off in accountancy and I kind of realized oh, I'm adding up what other people have done. Yeah. And I suddenly go, how do I get to be the one that that makes the change that other people add up, sort of thing.
Totally.
And then I kind of eventually figured out that's marketing. What I love about your career so far, I should say so far, shouldn't I?
Yeah, thanks.
Is you've done what I wish I'd done, which is you've done the corporate stint, but you very quickly realised that actually there's life outside, corporate headquarters, and there's a whole kind of exciting startup world. So before we get onto that, because that's obviously the main thing I want to talk to you about, you were I was going to say you're in Bev, weren't you, for a number of years, and you managed Stella. What do you recall from that time? What did that teach you about marketing that puts you in a good stead for today?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, I think it was about 5 years in corporate, if we're going to say that, at Nestle and then at InBev. And whilst I realised relatively quickly that world probably wasn't for me, I'm so glad I started there, because the biggest thing I learned working on a brand like Stella Artois, I should say, because I learned that very early when I started at Stella Artois, that you call it Stella Artois.
You can add Stella. £2 to a pint just by going Artois.
It's
right?
Stella Artois. Was kind of how to do things properly, which again I say in inverted commas, but I don't think I appreciated how amazing that education is in that kind of FMCG world. So at Nestle, it was called Building Brands the Nestle Way, which I don't know, assume still exists in some way or the other. And at InBev, it was the Marketing Excellence Program. And whilst that sounds very like hoity-toity, it actually was just incredibly useful on how you build a brand. So, consumer insight and brand strategy and brand purpose and all of these things and frameworks, which at the time I sometimes found overwhelming. But actually now, when you move into a world which has none of that structure, has been incredibly valuable to me. And then the other thing I always think about is, like, both at InBev and at Nestle, is their portfolio businesses. And so you're essentially sitting with your competitors next to you, because you're all selling beer. So beer in particular, I think, because it's probably offending lots of people when I say that lots of beers taste quite the same. Yeah. And so how you build that portfolio incrementally so that you're not cannibalizing from each other fundamentally came down to marketing and brand, so that you could differentiate them sufficiently, that you had different audiences and different customers and so on. And so coming out of that and looking back, I'm like, oh, that's actually amazing, because if you can build Stella Artois next to Budweiser, next to Corona as one business, then you're really getting those fundamental things right. And now I don't work in a portfolio business in the same way, but I think those principles have been incredibly useful to stick with.
One of the things I love as well, but you worked on Stella Artois, cider, if I've got the pronunciation right.
Cider, not cider.
Cider, not cider. Yeah, very clever, because it gives it some provenance and some je ne sais quoi, all that kind of thing. It's one of my favourite innovation case studies for a curious reason, because when it first launched, I was like, that ain't going to work. Yeah. Like, honestly, what credibility does Stella have going into cider? I mean, I want my cider from a unusual orchard in West Country, that no one's ever heard of, kind of thing. I thought, that's an odd move. It's only actually when I came to work for System 1, and then I suddenly realised that System 1 was using the testing on that as a brilliant case study of how to get innovation right. And the fact that the phrase that System 1 were using is 80% familiar and 20% new, because it brought the Stella brand into a category that at that time was establishing itself, but gave it a little twist, right, with raspberries or fruits. Yeah. And actually, I think it's a brilliant case study in how to innovate. But from from someone who used to manage it, how successful was that? And is there any truth in how I've kind of articulated it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I can't take any credit for the launch of cider originally, because that wasn't when I was working on it. But I think one of the things that was amazing working at InBev was innovating within that portfolio. And so with Cidra is exactly as you said. We were a beer business. We are predominantly a beer business. Identifying that opportunity, and then this was before my time, but I think there were discussions on, do you launch an entirely new brand, or do you actually put it underneath another brand? And I think the amazing thing with Cidra is that it took all the strengths of the Stella Artois brand, and I know it's an interesting brand because it's had its ups and downs in terms of brand perception, but fundamentally is a good quality brand with lots of loyal fans, but added, as you said, that kind of twist and that kind of Belgian provenance, and making it cider, not cider, and kind of having a bit of a knowing wink, saw it be super successful, and leverage the fact that obviously we have it's very much not we anymore, but they have the relationships with the retailers and the on-trade and so on to be able to drive it. So it was super successful. I think in the latter years, other competition catches up. So we were not the only brand innovating in fruit cider, and lots of other competitors can see where the market was going in terms of consumers wanting sweeter, taste palettes and things like that. And so it became very noisy. I remember when I was working on it around share of voice from a media perspective and things, because lots of people, and there was a lot of innovation. So it was like raspberry and peach and this and that, and like getting the right shelf space and those kind of things. But fundamentally, like to be able to create an entirely new category under a mother brand, I think is a pretty
really good
case study.
And also, I think it's a classic case of remembering that you're not the consumer. Because I looked at it having a little bit of experience in the drinks business and a little bit in beer, going, oh yeah, that's kind of breaking the rules a little bit.
Yeah.
But from a consumer point of view, that brand I love.
Yeah.
Making a category quite simple to understand and making it sound delicious by adding fruit, like tick tick tick. You always hence why you need to do the research to understand whether it's going to work. Now after that, you did what I wish I'd done, right? Which is kind of you made the big jump, and I think it is a big jump, isn't it? From well-established marketing-led organisations with all the academies and support and professionalisation. Now, you went to Deliveroo, which obviously sat here now, go, oh yeah, Deliveroo, big successful company. But when you joined, it was probably a handful of people in central London kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
What inspired the jump from kind of, I guess, the safety, and relatively early on in your career as well, the safety of that professional organisation that you get with InBev, to a pretty crazy, I'm guessing a crazy startup kind of.
I don't think I knew what I was getting myself
strap yourself onto the rocket ship and, head for the skies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said before, that I really appreciated the grounding I was getting and the kind of education, and also like the opportunity to work on amazing brands, like to work on Stella Artois and Quality Street and Fruit Pastels so early in my career was amazing. And you also got exposure to the full marketing mix and P&L ownership and all of that kind of stuff that you don't necessarily get in other businesses. But quite early on, I was like, I think I'm not quite sure I fit here. Just from a personal perspective, the corporateness and both of those businesses are quite different. Nestle and InBev are not culturally the same, but ultimately very well established, huge conglomerates, slow and steady growth with very mature categories. And I just had, without really knowing what I was getting myself into, had an itch of, I want to take more risk. I want to have more responsibility, which isn't necessarily more budget, but like I want to be able to make decisions, and they might be bad decisions and we might fail, but I want to feel like I'm not a cog in the wheel.
So when you say you didn't fit, can you do you remember the moment that you went, I don't fit? Was there like a time, or was it just a general feeling?
It was kind of a general feeling from, to be totally honest, from like quite early. When I was at Nestle, this sounds ridiculous to be like I changed my career because I didn't like not wearing jeans, but it was business attire. And now when I look back at every day in the office, I moved to York for the role, which I ended up loving. I definitely, as a Londoner that had went to uni in Nottingham, was probably not as open-minded about moving to York as I should have been at the time. And I just remember probably the best way to describe it from a personal perspective was I was myself. I loved the people I worked with at Nestle. I had great bosses. I made great friends, but ultimately felt like I had to kind of dial myself down somewhat in those environments, and that I'm by nature a really curious person. I ask lots of questions that can come across as challenging at times, and realizing that there wasn't necessarily that openness. Well, not purposefully, but just kind of the infrastructure wasn't there to say, like, let's do this totally differently to how we've done it before. You were just kind of in the cycle of, it only took for me 3 or 4 or 5 annual planning cycles to be like, I don't think this is for me career-wise, long-term. And so that, I was kind of hungry for something more entrepreneurial. I happened to be a really early consumer of Deliveroo because I lived in Islington, I lived on my own, I'm not a great cook. And so, when I saw the opportunity, it felt like a great fit at the time. But as you said, like, Deliveroo really wasn't well known. So when I think I told you this earlier, like when I resigned to my boss at the time, he replied, "Deliver who?" And when I saw him years later, we remembered that.
Now going, damn it.
Yeah. He, who it could have been a startup that totally failed. I still think it was probably the right thing for me to do at that moment in my career. But definitely ended up being like a rocket ship that I hadn't anticipated.
And that is, the difference between, I don't know what your targets in InBev were, but if you grow 5 or 10%, that's probably in a standout year. I assume to a business where doubling is the minimum requirement, just to stand still kind of thing in a category that's exploding. Describe to me what the greatest challenge for you personally, going from, a stable environment to, I imagine, quite a hectic, dynamic, constantly changing, challenging environment like that.
Definitely. And I think the first year at Deliveroo was probably the most challenging in my career, just from a like, holy moly, I was like, what on earth is going on? Because, you know, at that point it was so early in a way that the percentages are crazy, right? There's like 1,000% because you're going from like barely anything. But I think the biggest shift for me was the pace. So the irony of like fast moving consumer goods not necessarily being that fast moving internally in those type of businesses, whereas here we were just a totally different business model and so early. So one of my first roles, part of my responsibility was rider marketing. And I remember my boss at the time saying, take everything you've learned about doing consumer marketing in terms of how you recruit consumers and how you maintain their loyalty and all of those things and apply it to riders. Cool, but it's actually very different. And, you know, got drawn in by the head of rider marketing title and then realized I was the head of me and the only person doing it globally. So literally figuring out from scratch, like, what does it mean to do rider marketing? Who are our target audience? What channels are they in? And literally going from scratch. We didn't have any agencies. So like if I wanted to buy media, I was literally phoning up people and saying, can I have an ad in this magazine? And the pace of that was, you know, if you didn't have enough rider applicants applying to become riders at the beginning of the week, you knew you had a problem servicing demand at the end of the week. And so dealing with that kind of relentlessness and pace and also uncertainty, because we were making it up as we went along, was a lot to reckon with. I also loved it though, like loved it to the point that it was kind of all consuming, because you just get such a kick when you then are getting enough rider applicants, or then you're seeing the orders tick up. And, you know, we were doing restaurant marketing for the first time and being able to say, you know, you can get Wagamama on Deliveroo and those kind of things. It was kind of addictive in a way that I hadn't had before in my career, because you felt like you were really part of it.
I imagine the feedback loop is super fast, isn't it? Like, you know, you're not having to wait 12 months to see if your brand equity measures have shifted by 1%, right? If the riders don't turn up on Saturday, game over. Yeah.
Totally. And, you know, like customer service then is going up. People are, you know, haven't got their orders. Orders are not as high as they could be. You've got the demand. How you start managing like marketing spend. So should we, when and how should we be spending if actually our demand is higher than our supply? And so all of that kind of stuff was new to all of us, but definitely new to me. From, you know, supply issues weren't something that we really thought about day to day. You knew there was going to be enough Stella Artois on shelf most of the time. This was very, very real time.
It's interesting, you remind me of something. I did a little bit of work for Deliveroo with System 1. It's maybe a couple of years ago. And it was quite interesting because one of the benefits of our sort of test is it predicts whether it's going to impact on short-term sales and long-term sales. Anyway, they called me and said, we've got a bit of a problem. I was like, oh no, what's happened? You know, sort of thing. And they said, well, the trouble is we're obviously selling this methodology into the business and they think it's great. But honestly, like, we're expecting to double. So how are you going to go where is doubling our sales the next 12 weeks good or bad? How do we know, right? Because the market's doubling anyway. So how do you, and I was like, well, it's relative to your competition and so on. But, you know, it is changing so rapidly. It becomes quite challenging to know what success is, doesn't it, when it's moving that fast?
I mean, it was a really nice problem to have, but that definitely was a real problem during that journey of like exponential growth, was how much of this is because of the work we're doing in the marketing team versus how much of everything else. And we did some really innovative, quite innovative stuff where, you know, it was too soon for us to have a full like econometric model because we just didn't have good enough data. But we did, you know, incrementality tests on performance marketing channels. We did, you know, we first went on TV. We did regional testing so we could actually see the difference between how things work, so that it was definitely not perfect, but at least it gave us some better benchmarks where you could say, actually, like, our contribution is this. But the other thing with Deliveroo, and definitely true with Who Gives a Crap as well, is our advertising was great, if I do say so myself, but it actually was a lot of the other touch points that massively drove awareness. So, you know, riders in really standout rider kit, window stickers in all of the restaurants. Those touch points are as impactful, if not more in a way, because they're really close to that point of connection than, you know, the TV ads and all of the other stuff.
No, that totally comes across. I mean, yeah, it scores very, very well on System 1. I think kind of 3-4 star average, most Deliveroo work, which is amazing. One thing I noticed as well is as a brand, the positioning has changed, hasn't it? So I mean, when I first used Deliveroo, it was like having a restaurant delivery kind of thing. That was how it felt. Now you can kind of get almost anything on it. Was that a conscious response to the market, or how did that change?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of people are familiar with the story of how Deliveroo started, but Will, who's the founder, he was a banker who had been working in New York, and he moved over to London. And literally the insight was he was working late, and he asked colleagues what they were going to get for dinner, and they said like a microwave meal. And he was shocked that he couldn't get the caliber of food that you could get in New York delivered in London. And so that was really the starting point of wanting to be able to get good restaurant food delivered. As we scale, you want to be able to reach new audiences, and so you want to have the more mainstream restaurants as well. And that was also incredibly powerful to be able to get your kind of favorite high street restaurants delivered for the first time. It was like a dream for most consumers. And then there was really interesting discussions as we grew around like, what does that mean with fast food restaurants and so on. But ultimately, if you want to be the definitive food company, which is what the Deliveroo kind of vision was, that means like having what consumers are looking for in all occasions, in all different need states. Like me as a consumer can want something super premium one night and then want a fast food delivery
toilet roll the next day.
Next day, exactly. And so it was less, I think it was an acknowledgement as we grew and became more mature that if you really want to be that kind of definitive business, you can't be in that super narrow niche. But obviously, like all businesses that scale, same with Who Gives a Crap, as you move away from that like super bullseye target audience or that very kind of niche proposition, how you continue to differentiate yourself as a brand in a more mainstream world it's like the classic kind of trade-off that you have to consider.
Now, you had 5 amazing years, didn't you, at Deliveroo? Quite something, and it must be an incredible training ground as well for what you're doing now, of course, yes. Because you recently became managing director of Who Gives a Crap. Let's for anyone out there who I love the fact you're still smiling about the introduction, so you never get tired of the
Funny to say that you work in toilet paper and
exactly.
The company has crap in the name.
We have crap in the title.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you feel a bit awkward about that? Does it feel like a bit strange?
No, I kind of love it. Yeah. It's the reaction I either get is either people are like, sorry, say that one more time, or people know the brand and are like, oh, that's really cool.
It's the in-joke. Yeah.
And you never thought, I did a careers talk years ago at my old school, and this is when I was still very much kind of in the marketing world. I think it was when I was at Deliveroo, and I remember talking about choosing brands and industries. At that point, I'd worked in sweets and chocolate, in beer, and then in food delivery. And I was like, oh, I'd never work in a boring category or industry. For example, I'd never work in toilet paper because it was just the category that came to mind as like illustrative of something incredibly boring. So the universe obviously has a funny way of laughing at us. And now I kind of love that ostensibly toilet paper is super boring because it's, in a way, it's that made this role and what Who Gives a Crap have done before my time that made it so compelling.
I've got a theory about this. I've long thought that I must do this one day rather than just talk about this. But I do have this theory of finding the most boring categories in the world on the basis that everyone thinks like you think. And I think too, right? You go, oh, I'd love to work in chocolate, or I'd love to work for an airline. And those categories are well overexposed with the world's best marketers, right? Find the dullest category, the most commoditized category where there is no marketing at all, and do something interesting. And weirdly, going back to the System 1 database as well, we find an inverse relationship between how interesting the category is and how good the advertising. So the more interesting the category, like the more feature heavy, like mobile phones or things like that, typically the worse the advertising, because you tend to, to have
too focused on
exactly, you're too focused on products, right? We've got so many things to talk about. Yeah. Our new kind of LED headlights. Yeah. Whereas if you've got it's a commodity category, I mean, you're taking it to the extreme, you have to do brand. You have to create a brand, you have to stand for something, and you have to make entertaining advertising that people can remember. Because you're not going to talk about, I've got 15 ply, sort of super soft, kind of toilet roll, whatever. I don't know, maybe that's an innovation idea, but I don't think so. But so it becomes about the brand, doesn't it? But tell us about the backstory, because I'm sure people are wondering, like, how on earth did someone decide to go and innovate in the, toilet roll market?
Yes. Who Gives a Crap has been around for just over 10 years. There's 3 founders. They're all still in the business. Simon, who's my boss, is the CEO, and he was the face of how the business started because it was actually crowdfunded. So he had this idea. He'd been working in kind of like purpose for, or thinking about how you can do business differently and use capitalism to do good for a while. And he kind of was like it sounds overly simplified, but had this moment of, we should make toilet paper, we should donate half of our profits, and it's all donated to WASH initiatives to build clean water and sanitation. And decided that the way to get that off the ground was to sit on a toilet on a live web stream for as long as it took for them to crowdfund $50,000. Turns out it took 50 hours.
50?
Yes. And I have grilled him on this when I joined, saying, like, really?
Did he have Deliveroo delivering him, like, food to his toilet? Like,
I actually haven't asked him that question, which I should have. But I guess in a way that's kind of indicative of how Who Gives a Crap has done things from the beginning, which is, like, always very tongue-in-cheek. Like, you can, if you Google it, you will see pictures of him on the toilet. It was like a funny moment in my first week when I was doing a presentation and I slacked someone saying, "Oh, do you have that picture of Simon on the toilet?" Which is not something you necessarily think you're going to say about your boss in the first week of a new job. But it went viral, but not so to speak. It actually did, and so it got traction in random countries. It was on, like, I think the front page of a big media website in Brazil or something. So it truly went everywhere because it's funny and silly. It was already called Who Gives a Crap at that point. And we crowdfunded the amount to fund that first production. And obviously because of that traction, there was, you know, everyone who had donated and everyone who had seen it. And to be honest, like, the rest was history from there in terms of how the business then grew. It was immediately D2C, but it's funny because when we talk about it, it was like D2C at that point. So this is like 2012, 2013, it wasn't like a conscious choice to be a D2C brand. It was more, this is the easiest way for us to start.
It wasn't some
quickly.
Genius strategy about the future is going to be subscription, so that's what we're going to
exactly.
do. It wasn't a thought.
It was more, you know, we want to get to consume, we want to make this product. If you think about the alternative would have been to rock up to retailers and start talking to them from early days. And I think, and I can't speak super accurately because it's way before my time, but it was kind of, let's get it out to consumers and learn and see how we go. And then obviously just grew from there. And one of the great benefits of a D2C business is you obviously have that interaction with customers. You're really getting their feedback very live, and it's pretty scalable across markets. So, you know, we started in Australia, and then we're now in the US, the UK, and also in mainland Europe as well.
It's funny that it doesn't obviously stand out as a candidate because you go, it's low value, it's bulky, it's an everyday purchase, it's not like a luxury purchase, you know. So it doesn't obviously put itself out there as, oh yeah, I'm going to subscribe to toilet roll. But obviously it's worked. So what was the secret to the subscription working?
Well, one thing, as you said, was we did, I guess, flip it on its head a bit, which is on our website, you buy the toilet paper in boxes 24 and 48. So it is in bulk. You know, that really helps from a sustainability perspective as well, because our rolls are double length as well. And so, like, the overall footprint of that purchase is as low as possible because you're buying it in bulk.
And presumably you're reducing the supply chains. You're not delivering it to a distribution centre, going out to a regional distribution centre, going to a store, sat in the back for a while. Then
exactly, and there's lots of, you know, I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is, like, progress over perfection. So I'm definitely not saying this way is 100% better than that way, because, you know, we also want to be in retail, and there's lots of benefits in both the models. But with everything that we've tried to do, we've always tried to do it kind of to the best of our ability at that time. And what we found is, like, people love just having one less thing to think about. We talk a lot about kind of unexpected delight. So, you know, that one of the things I think that has made Who Gives a Crap as popular as it is because it's made something that's really boring, easy, and also delightful. So, you know, they're all individually wrapped, which the prime reason for doing that is hygiene, because it's in a big box and, you know, you don't want them to get dusty whilst you're going through them. It's like, well, if you're going to do that, you might as well make it great. And so it means that people, like, love showing them in their toilet. There's lots of Easter eggs in our kind of tone of voice and, you know, hidden thing. Well, for anyone who's not a customer yet, I'll ruin the surprise. But at the bottom of the boxes, we have emergency rolls, which are wrapped differently and are called emergency rolls. And that's like a reminder to them to stock up, which is really fun. And, you know, all of the kind of touch points along the consumer journey, from the website copy to the emails to social and everything, is just trying to help people do good in a way that's fun and easy.
One of the most genius bits of marketing when I was a kid growing up was you used to get lollies and they'd have a joke on the stick. That once you'd eaten the lolly, then you reveal the joke. It's like those little surprise and delight things at the bottom of something is brilliant.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the causes that we care about, we fundamentally exist to donate our profits and to make a difference in wash and also sustainability. We take those very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And I think with consumers want to make better choices, but they don't want to be shamed into it. They don't want to be guilted into it. Like everyone's got enough going on in their lives. They don't need a brand saying you're using the wrong toilet paper in a very lofty way. But if we can make it easy for people to make the switch where they are doing good, but actually it's also fun and delightful, I think that's
let's talk about the purpose, because purpose is a hot topic in marketing. It's used and abused in probably equal measure, isn't it? So what is the impact you're actually having on good causes in terms of hygiene and sanitation and water?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I love our business model is because rather than that kind of, and what's the purpose of this, coffee cup or whatever and how it's going to help in the world, it just fundamentally, everything we sell does good. And there's two sides to it. So there's the profits, which we've donated over £6 million so far to various wash causes around the world. We have a number of partners. WaterAid is kind of probably the biggest and most well known. And then on the sustainability side, we can literally calculate, and it's done based on the trees that would have been cut down if the toilet paper we'd sold was traditional.
So how is it made then? So if it's not made from trees, what is it made from?
We have two product lines. One is bamboo, and one is recycled paper. So people make jokes about it's recycled paper. It's not recycled toilet paper. That recycled paper is kind of old school homeworks, old office
there's the answer to my question. If only I knew.
And it's actually we have that on the retail pack, so that people understand what it is. And for anyone that wants to geek out on paper, there is various grades of what different types of recycling goes to. So that it's office and those kind of stuff like this, basically. And so those are our two product lines. The recycled are the ones that you see in the nice brightly coloured wrappers, and the bamboo is the black and white. So we can calculate kind of number of trees saved. And so I think as of the last couple of months or so, it's 1.4 million trees that we've saved to date. And obviously as we grow, that becomes kind of exponential because we have incredibly strong retention and loyalty, which is awesome. And so it's cool to be able to see, each of those consumers that stays with us is saving more and more trees, and same on the kind of profitability side. So I think we do really hold ourselves to account on trying to share as much of that stuff as possible. Again, the progress over perfection thing comes in, where I think it's a really interesting space where lots of brands are talking about these things. You do need to be conscious of if brands are over-egging those things. Equally, I think it's something that we're super proud of and try to give as much transparency as we can.
Now, you've been growing rapidly, and I think you're recently now listed in Waitrose.
We are,
right?
yes.
Oh, congratulations.
Our first national
ladies
retailer.
Ladies and gentlemen, available
exciting.
now in Waitrose,
Yes.
That's obviously a new distribution channel, I guess, for you.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges does that give you as going from a D2C now to be in retail as well?
It's been a really interesting journey, and it was probably one of the reasons why I was hired and I built out a team here, which is, you can scale the business when it's primarily D2C without necessarily having people on the ground. But when we're really thinking about that kind of local retailer knowledge and so on, I think the why it comes back to our big, hairy, audacious goal is pretty hairy and pretty audacious, and recognizing that, we love being the biggest toilet paper D2C brand, but the reality is most people aren't buying their toilet paper online. And so kind of the classic physical availability of we want to be where our consumers are, it's very different. So internally, obviously the majority of the business has been focused on D2C. So thinking about what processes you need, what capabilities you need, having a sales team, having a pack and proposition that works for retail, because as much as I would have loved to have my big box of 48 rolls on shelf in Waitrose, I don't think we would have got that much shelf space. So it was almost starting from scratch on a number of the fundamentals, and figuring out, given that we're not going to control the customer experience in the same way or have as many touch points with them, how do you try and bring to life what that brand is all about on, a second or whatever the latest stat is on how long you have when someone's on looking at shelf. and kind of bringing all of those things to life. And to be honest, we are very, very excited that we've launched in Waitrose. In many ways, like when I joined, getting that retailer listing felt like a huge milestone. Then when you get there, you realize like actually it's the start line, not the finish line. And so we know it's kind of very beginning of the journey. Super excited to be working with Waitrose and kind of partnering on how we grow that eco segment in store. And figuring out as we go, with packaging, for example, I'm sure the packaging that's in store today is not necessarily going to be the packaging that's there in 5 years, but really proud of kind of what we've done to start with.
Amazing. Congratulations. Now, imagine to get to this point as well, you haven't been blessed with big budgets like you might have had if you went back to your AB InBev days. So how have you been able to grow when you've got a lot less resource than, say, the market leader in this category?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes back to some of the stuff we've already talked about. So, the packaging is very different to most normal toilet paper, and that's done a few things. One is the packaging and probably the whole kind of brand in itself, which has meant that I generally don't like when people talk about people loving the brand and brand love and stuff, because it's like they don't love your brand as much as you think that they do. However, we do have a Slack channel called Customer Love Letters, and you'd be surprised, people really do love the brand. Because of our, like, when I say brand in terms of the fundamentals of kind of the tone of voice, the purpose, people feel like they are doing good, but they also bring this like smidgen of joy because our emails are funny and those kind of things. That means we have a huge amount of advocacy. So half of our customers have given Who Gives a Crap as a gift, which is ridiculous when you pause because it's toilet paper gift. That comes from the fact that we have, they're fun because they're wrapped. We also do limited editions, which also sounds silly when you think about it, limited edition toilet paper. But we've done a huge array of different things. We've done holiday editions. We've done like a Where's Waldo style one. And so, kids love them. People give them as gifts. So all of that kind of stuff has meant that word of mouth, advocacy, gifting has been huge for us. Also, people literally just seeing it in their friends' houses. And then we've also done that kind of a bit more explicitly on the B2B side. So we talk about B2B to B, which is to build brand, an awesome way of just driving more visibility. So hopefully people go into cafes, to restaurants, to hotels, to offices, and they see our brand. And again, because of the wrapping, that it's Who Gives a Crap. And when you talk about limited resources, that's super powerful because it's obviously a sales channel, but also doing the marketing side as well.
I think this is a massively misunderstood or underestimated channel is B2B, isn't it? I think people forget that, well, firstly, that B2B can operate similar to B2C and you're building your brand in the same way you might do elsewhere, but also that B2B can help you build your brand overall because you see in the right places. You talk to people that might then go on and buy you as well. The B2B can be a really powerful channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And for
us, particularly when you've got no budget as well. This is the thing, because then you leverage other people's budget or you leverage availability through third parties. Yeah,
exactly. And especially in Australia, which is our most mature market, like it's really fun when you are in Melbourne because you really see the potential of that in a similar way probably to how people see Deliveroo in London, like a window sticker on every restaurant, that kind of Who Gives a Crap in every toilet. We're not quite there yet in the UK. You're there in certain pockets of London. You will see it. But the weird but also amazing thing about working in toilet paper is that obviously toilet paper it's not a category that needs education on what the actual product is or that doesn't have the penetration. But the education on like the problem that we have around deforestation and wash, and also the opportunity to drive that visibility is kind of endless. And so, I'm excited about hopefully one day every restaurant in the UK.
Right, similar. The brands that you guys remind me of a lot is Tony's Chocolonely. Yeah. I don't know if you've been to Amsterdam, where they originate, but that is literally like seeing the future because like Tony's pops up everywhere, kind of thing, and it's just amazing. And the packaging again, and the novelty and all that kind of thing works really as well. You've also recently had your first TV campaign. Congratulations!
Thank you.
So it's all very grown up now,
yes,
isn't it? So we're on TV, ladies and gentlemen. How's that gone?
Oh, it's been a really interesting journey, and we're going through that classic kind of shift when, as a scale up, and primarily as a DTC brand, that's then scaling both in DTC and also into other channels. The traditional D2C startup channels of being really reliant on performance marketing, which is the other side to the word of mouth piece, I guess, in terms of how we scaled, isn't going to be the formula that's going to work for us in the future. And obviously with a marketing background, one of the things I've been super passionate about since I joined was, how do we mature and diversify the way that we're approaching marketing? And it is a massive leap to have that conversation of, we're not going to be able to measure it in quite the same way, of the impact that it has and all of those things. But it's been really exciting. I think there's been lots of things that we've talked about, one of which is, as we've discussed, we have a really strong brand in terms of those fundamentals, but we haven't really done brand marketing before. So what does Who Gives a Crap look like on TV? Everyone in the business probably had a different idea of what that was at the beginning. And as the managing director and not the marketing director, knowing when to keep my mouth shut and when to give my opinions was also like a personal learning with that. For anyone that has or hasn't seen the ad is primarily bum focused, which is another sentence you don't realise you're going to say often.
Tell you what, why don't we quickly play the ad now,
right,
so everyone listening and watching can see it.
Our planet, our future, rests upon your cheeks. Every day, over 1 million trees are destroyed to make traditional toilet paper. With Who Gives a Crap's recycled glue roll, bums of the world, you can stand, nay, sit down for what you believe in. Uncrap the world with Who Gives a Crap.
Now, what we see in this ad, of course, is a lot of people shaking their bums. Are we going to see a lot more bum shaking in future? Is this going to become the iconic Who Gives a Crap signature?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the platform is Uncrap the World. And, the whole idea, as we've talked about already, is, we don't want to be preachy. We don't want to guilt people. We want to kind of excite people and get them to be advocates, get them to be activists. And so it's kind of a call to bums to get people to take that leap. And it's hopefully indicative of the type of brand that we are, which is a bit silly, literally tongue-in-cheek. And so, yes, I think you will see more bums around.
The copy's great, by the way. I love this.
Well, I was about to say thank you, and I was like, all credit to the creative and marketing team.
Sit down for a good cause.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was genius. Well, quick plug for the TV, by the way, because it did very well on System 1, so well done. And it's unusual for startups to do that straight out the bat as well. I mean, we did a research project a couple of years ago called Scaling Up Without Screwing Up. It's amazing how many startups, when they go on TV, don't get it right, and we worked out it takes on average 4 years for a startup to get to the average on the database. Yeah. So well done for getting straight in there and doing a good job. You mentioned something there about being the managing director, not the marketing director. I think this is a challenge. Yeah. So maybe to end on, tell me what it's been like making that transition from marketing director to managing director, because that's quite unusual. There's not that many marketing directors do make that move. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, because actually it's a great training ground for strategy and vision and understanding your customer. But what's that change been like for you?
When I was making the decision to leave Deliveroo, I knew I kind of had two decision points. Like, did I want to go deeper into the marketing route and, go down a CMO type route, or did I want to move into this general management kind of route? And I guess in that earlier jump I took in my career, I do like trying new things. And I guess coming all the way back to the beginning about always having been interested in business and driving growth in the business, I almost had FOMO on the other functions and have always been very interested in
give me a supply chain to get my hands on.
How it all comes together. And so just felt like from a learning perspective, it would just be such an amazing opportunity. It's a leap. For me, it's also a leap for business to, bring me on and do that, which I'm super grateful for. I think my personal development opportunities are two opposite things. On the marketing side, it's how do I empower the marketing team that I have and also my global peers to do their jobs and not getting too into the day-to-day, but also adding value where I know I can. And obviously how we do marketing is super important to the overall UK and Europe business. Then the other side is supply chain, manufacturing toilet paper.
You're the one that gets phone call when the factory's burnt down.
Or the supply chain people also get that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a really interesting, leadership development on obviously working with people where they have better functional expertise than I do, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and nor am I ever going to overtake what a supply chain person knows. But recognizing where you can still add value because you have that holistic overall view, building the team and kind of setting the overall vision. But it's really fun because it's two such different dynamics and things to learn about. So It's been 18 months. It feels it's one of those classics, like it feels like 2 minutes and also a lifetime.
I remember actually, the closest I've been to you was doing a private equity takeover of juice business. And the thing that shocked me was I remember the first board meeting and marketing got half an hour at the end. And I was like, I sat through the whole thing, talking about legal disputes or factory efficiency or how we're going to fund the business. I loved it though, because you realise actually as a marketer, you have so much impact on the business, but you need to understand how the rest of the business works, because your decisions affect supply chain, the margin you make, totally. Or, how happy customers are. It's really, really good, I think, for a marketer to see the impact they have on the whole business.
100%. And I've always been like the geeky commercial marketer that had wanted to know, how it all leads back to the P&L and all of that kind of stuff. So it's fun to be in this role.
Brilliant. Emily, it's been a real blast talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
You.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for listening to Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed making it. If you never want to miss an episode again, please do hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch this, head on over to YouTube, hit subscribe over there as well. If you want to contact me, you can do at Twitter @UncensoredCMO, or I'm on LinkedIn, John Evans. It's been great having you with me. See you next time.